In the meantime, my panelists have joined me, one on site and the others virtually, for a conversation about the future. Now, the Interpower project is focused on cross-border cooperation in offshore wind between firstly cluster organizations and secondly SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, of course all in the North Sea region. Now we're going to talk about how transnational collaboration between offshore wind industry SMEs can be strengthened in the future. This is important, certainly for Europe, as offshore wind energy plays a key role in reaching Europe's renewable energy and climate targets. If we want to scale up, in other words, in the next years, it's crucial to work together and to think of what kind of support is needed to do so. Now we're going to listen to different views and positions. The EU policy view will be represented by Joachim Balke, who's virtually joining us. He works as head of unit for the Directorate-General for Energy. And in this panel, the view of the cluster organizations and the SMEs will be expressed by Glenda Napier of Energy Cluster Denmark, Heike Winkler, who's managing director of Windagentur Bremerhaven into Power Partner Germany, and Christophe, Dhaene, who's joining me here, who's CEO of EBO Enterprises. Welcome to you all. Now, perhaps before we start, if you have any questions during this panel discussion, please don't hesitate and post these questions in the chat, and the speaker who your question is addressed to. If we get that information, we bring the questions to the table at the end of our discussion. If there would be not enough time, then you find the answers afterwards on the website. Now let's make first a tour de table, as the French say. I would like to learn more about the entity you're working for and what the key messages are regarding transnational collaborations. Let me start with you, Mr. Balke. In short, what is the EU's renewable offshore strategy and what are the implications towards SMEs?
Thank you very much from my side for the invitation. I am very, very pleased to be here today on this final event of the Interreg project Into Power, a very, very successful project and one which fits, I believe, extremely well into our policy priorities as European Commission in the field of offshore. I want to say just a few words on the offshore strategy and why we believe that this project is actually quite exemplary in filling it with life and with purpose. Also on behalf of our Director-General, Dette Jørgensen, who would have very much liked to be here herself today, as she does take a very, very keen interest also in this development of offshore. I think it's very good that we see through this project that our EU tools, the tools that we employ as Commission, can actually also reach SMEs because we do often focus, or at least suspected to focus, on big companies, whereas in this field of offshore, what we think is actually very, very important is that we're talking about an industrial network which goes much deeper, I would say, into our economic landscape, because it does rely not only on big companies that perhaps all of us know, but it does rely on a very broad network, in particular also of SMEs who are an integral part of this value chain. And I think for us, this has been a key element that we wanted to bring out in the offshore strategy, that when we're talking about the development of offshore renewables, we are talking, perhaps most importantly, about a source of employment and value creation for the whole of Europe, because it is a branch of our economy which is very much based on our domestic knowledge and leadership, and which goes, as I said, very deep and includes many, many SMEs. Now, when we look at the offshore strategy, perhaps just three elements I would quickly like to point out. First of all, what we wanted to do with the offshore strategy is give a certain amount of visibility to the kind of upscale, the kind of industrial upscale that is going to be needed. And it is, as you all know, enormous because we're looking at potentially 300 gigawatt in 2050, which is really a change of scale compared to what we have today. And we think it is important for the industry to have this clear visibility on the kind of growth which we expect to happen in volume, because that has repercussions on the whole value chain. And upscaling will be needed on all parts of that value chain. So this visibility is one important element, and that's why we have also put forward specific numbers today. Secondly, there is clearly a need, and this is the topic of this panel, for more cooperation on a regional scale, but also across Europe. And that's why, again, this project is, I think, a very good exemplification of that. When we're talking about regional cooperation, we mean both when it comes to energy system planning, grid planning, for example, but also when it comes to cooperation in terms of the industrial value chain and the elements of it that we think require really a European strategic approach to identify basically those parts also in the value chain which need most urgently to be upscaled. We have good examples of regional cooperation, such as, for example, the North Sea cooperation in the context of the NSEC group, which you're all familiar with. We see this being replicated now, for example, in the Baltic Sea area, in BIMIP, and we think this is also a very important thing, that these positive examples of regional cooperation are being replicated throughout Europe. Now, thirdly, and this comes really to the heart of today's event, the role of SMEs, and I would also stress innovation in particular in context, are key because we will need a lot of innovation to achieve the objectives we have set out. We will need innovation on all fronts when it comes to grid development, for example, because here clearly we need to bring to the waters new solutions when it comes to rolling out a more integrated grid, but also when it comes to technologies other than fixed bottom offshore wind, which we want to get out into European waters in order to tap also into the potential of other sea basins which have other natural conditions than the North Sea. So innovation is clearly key, and SMEs, as we all know, play a very, very important role in that innovation. And this is why we're very keen on SMEs being a key part, really, of this exercise. Now, to come back to the project, into power is clearly offshore, the offshore renewable energy strategy put into practice. The private partners have done exactly this analysis of the needs and have put forward very concrete actions to basically bring complete the value chain. Now, this project is coming to an end, but has been a success and has allowed lots of business opportunities and projects to emerge. And the North Sea region, I think, has definitely benefited a lot from that. And we would like to help this success to be replicated across Europe. Okay. I think that's all what I would like to say by way of introduction from my side. Once again, very much for the invitation. We think this is really an excellent example of how cooperation on offshore technologies should work. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. 3 important things: visibility, cooperation, and innovation. That's what we remember. Another important thing, Christophe, is meeting each other as SMEs. And in this time of pandemic, that's quite difficult.
Yes, it's important to see each other, to have a physical setting, because if you want to collaborate between companies, you need to see each other face to face. You need to trust each other before you're doing business. It's important. We are not selling small things. It's critical infrastructure. It's large, expensive assets. Yeah. So it's important. That's why with the Belgian Offshore Cluster, we always join physical fairs, like Wind Energy Hamburg, of course, but also in Copenhagen, and of course the fairs in the UK and France, everywhere in Europe. And what is important, we facilitate this by the first day of the fair. We always organize the Belgian Beer Night.
Oh, wonderful.
We not only export our offshore knowledge, but of course also some other things from Belgium. And it's important because we invite then also other national spaces, and we are also invited the days after to other, let's say, evening events. Yes. So that's important to see, to meet each other, to put the right people together. And by this statement, I would like to invite also Heike and Glenda next year in Hamburg. It's the last week of September to join the Belgian Beer Nights. And I should expect also an invitation from you the days after.
Now, I remember you that the matchmaking is at the end of the conference. Okay. So, now, Heike, I hope you're happy with the invitation. You love the Belgian beers. Oh, I think you're still on mute. We can't hear you. I don't have any sound.
Oh.
There you are, Heike. Now tell me, do you love Belgian beers?
Hello?
Yes, there you are.
Wonderful. It's finally working. Yes, we are very grateful for this invitation, and I'm sure our members also love this invitation, and we certainly would love to see our Belgian friends then at our Windforce conference this year later on. If we can travel, we really love this personal exchange and can confirm that's the right way.
I can imagine. Now, you work for Windagentur Bremerhaven, that's the Interpower partner Germany. How does WEB help SMEs today in their internationalization?
We are a wind and green hydrogen cluster, specifically oriented towards offshore wind, but also onshore wind and green hydrogen activities. And we support clearly by bringing players together, bigger companies, smaller companies. We encourage and organize cross-country collaboration. We regularly visit clusters or regions unless there is a pandemic like now. For example, we are bringing them together in our yearly annual conference, the Windforce conference, and we are always trying to get the connection to other clusters like the Belgium cluster, like the Scottish cluster, to have a frequent exchange. And we are trying to support the SMEs in their internationalization process to bring them close to the interesting export markets. And further, we need to support them for stable framework conditions, to make sure that they have a steady pipeline, to be able to have a good innovation process, and to always be busy in the offshore wind market. And we are looking forward also to coordinate the supply chain activities between the countries, because I think that's a very important support also for each SME from each cluster side, and ourselves as an organization. We are always trying to develop ourselves to learn more, to reach, for example, a new step in cluster certification, to bring that knowledge back to our member companies.
That's a good ambition for the future. Glenda, I'm going from Germany to Denmark. You work for Energy Cluster Denmark. What does it stand for? Because that's the entire energy sector.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Well, thank you for inviting. Energy Cluster Denmark is a new consolidated energy cluster organization in Denmark. We cover the entire country and we cover the entire energy sector. Just back in 2020, last summer, the energy sector decided that it is necessary to have a common shared innovation platform across the entire energy sector. Covering from energy production, energy storage, energy infrastructure, and energy efficiency, having sector coupling going across. That as a common innovation platform, because that is what is needed to achieve the goals, the climate goals that we need to achieve. So I think we've seen a very interesting movement in Denmark where the companies and the value chains across the energy sector has sort of come together. And we see, of course, as I think has been also mentioned, we see new value change occurring So that's a very interesting development. We have 400 members right now, mostly companies, obviously, a lot of knowledge institutions and universities, and we facilitate very concrete innovation, collaboration, and projects where new technologies are the results and are implemented at the end of our activities. Obviously, internationalization is very important for us as well.
Yes. Well, Glenda, looking back, during the Interpower project, SMEs were supported and simulated to multiply their transnational collaborations. We have to develop tools such as company directory, networking tool, multiple B2B events that help them increase their international relations. If you look back, what kind of value did you help to create with Interpower?
I think the Interpower project created a lot of value, and I fully agree with what was just said. People need to meet in order to collaborate, and I think the Interpower project fully supported that objective. I remember a very concrete situation in Esbjerg where we had a B2B, European B2B matchmaking event taking place, and we had two Dutch companies meeting each other for the first time, even though their companies in the Netherlands were only 25 kilometers away from each other. So the fact that you have to go out there and be out there in order to meet, and therefore also in order to collaborate, I think it is very important. And I think the Interpower project has supported the meeting and the touch points for European value chains within the offshore wind industry. If we look into numbers, we have generated, the project Interpower project has generated 1,700 meetings between SMEs and 11 transnational collaborations with just involving the Danish companies. So I think we've seen very concrete output coming out of the project, and the project itself shaping the ground for meeting up for the value chains. Very important.
Yes, connecting is very important. I come back to you, Heike, because you spoke about, if you think of the ambitions for the future, you spoke also about coordinating the supply chains between countries. What support do you need to make this happen?
As I said, stability is key for the SMEs to work, and they need sufficient volume to use the capacities they build up. So it's very important from our perspective to have somehow an overview where site activities are ongoing, which country has which market. And we see in Germany right now we have less site activities. This is always very challenging for SMEs. So a good coordination and a good collaboration is key if we really want to properly support the SMEs. We started in the Interpower project, for example, the German Inland campaign, which was supported by all our European partners. Thanks a lot from our side that we were able to integrate this in the project. And this way we reached about 1 million people here in Germany to show the situation and to remind that we need site activities and a stable pipeline for the SMEs that grow up here, a proper supply chain.
Yeah, I understand. You need markets, that's it. And I can understand that, like in Germany, it's a different situation. You need upcoming new projects. I was wondering, when I heard the minister at the beginning of the conference, when she spoke of the fact that you can have overproduction with the turbines, today we shut down our turbines. If that is something that you can do more research on, and that could be a possibility to explore more of the market, is that a possibility, for example, for Germany to put more research on that?
I think this is as well important, but the most important aspect is the market pipeline itself. It's the tender process, it's the projects that you can develop, and later on building it in the North Sea. So it's always depending on having a good overview about the different pipelines.
Yeah.
To be possible to adapt somehow and to make use of your international connection. And I'm in offshore industry since 2008, and I learned that the key is really international collaboration.
Yeah. Now, coming back to you, Christophe, as an SME, what do you think that the role for cluster organizations in assisting SMEs, what can they do? What can they do better? Is it good what they do? What is your opinion about this?
Well, first of all, I want to state that neither it is an innovation or a business cluster, they will never sell something instead of the SME. It's important. It's still the SME which needs to do something. But it's important that as well innovation clusters work transnational, and also the same with the business clusters, and that they invite each other to meet, to connect people. Mm-hmm. So I think this is key. So actually they should do a kind of pre-sales, but typically in the beginning you have innovation clusters which should invite each other, and then the business clusters can come after, or the opposite. It doesn't matter, but someone, a cluster organization, needs to leverage that path, mm-hmm. that it's easier for the SME to come in or to get contacts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other opinion? Well,
that's more a personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody's talking about innovation, and it's still for an SME very difficult to join this kind of innovation projects. There's a lot of there's a burden to activate this, because a normal
for
smaller SME, they just need to run their business, of course, and they need resources or effort to do this. So, if something can happen and lower the bureaucracy on this, that should also be a good initiative from the Europe side, I think.
Mr. Balke, it's sometimes difficult for small enterprises. It's a bit of a burden if you want to join innovation calls. Oh, you're still muted. No.
Sorry. Apologies.
Okay, there you are.
I hope I can be heard now. Thanks. As I said, I think it's important for us to that basically what we do benefits also SMEs. It's not always that obvious, but that's why I would perhaps first like to pick up on what I think Heike said about the need for SMEs to have a stable, let's say, pipeline of tenders, so that there is a constant demand, let's say. I think that is something that we've also identified as important, and that's why we have looked, for example, at the possibilities to coordinate also such tenders, basically in a regional format. For example, the NSEC group that I mentioned earlier on has been looking into the possibility to do that, and we've also picked up on that in the offshore strategy. So I think that is certainly one thing that we are trying to help member states to do, to coordinate in terms of the, let's say, the tenders that they plan, so that there is a constant demand, which allows indeed also an optimal use of the capacities which are already there, and an upscale where that is needed. Now we have, of course, also specific innovation tools through Horizon Europe, where we are also targeting the active participation of SMEs. And we will look also through this Horizon Europe in particular, for example, at the needs of innovation in terms of offshore grids. There is a lot to do from which SMEs can benefit directly or indirectly, and to which they can contribute. And we hope they will do that. Perhaps one last element I would like to mention. I mean, we talked a lot about the need for physical, let's say, meeting, contact, and exchanges, and all of that is absolutely true. One thing that we wanted to, let's say, reinvigorate, one tool in terms of increasing exchanges, is the Clean Energy Industrial Forum, which we wanted to, let's say, to expand on the one hand by expanding its membership, and on the other hand to have a targeted action strand in terms of offshore work in the context of this Clean Energy Industrial Forum. Offshore working group, which has already been kick-started, which we would also see as a tool really to help the industry meet also with public authorities to discuss exactly these needs of the supply chain. So these are a couple of elements, let's say, which we hope can also benefit SMEs then in upgrading.
Okay, any more concrete support measures foreseen for SMEs in the framework of EU's offshore renewable energy strategy?
I mean, perhaps one last element that I also mentioned, which I think is also relevant for SMEs, is on the side of the skills agenda, because there is certainly also a need to fill certain gaps in terms of the skills, in particular when we look at engineers, technicians, which will be very much needed. And here there are also a number of financing tools which are available for member states to set up such specific training schemes to fill those skills needs in a very targeted manner. Cohesion policy, but also, for example, the just transition mechanism can be used in that manner. And we have also proposed that to member states in the offshore strategy to use these financial tools specifically to fill these needs on the sides of the skills, to be sure that SMEs have basically qualified personnel available and can employ people, because we do think, and that's perhaps in closing an important point to make, that simply, I mean, this offshore strategy can be a big job motor for Europe also in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, Glenda, as to conclude, looking at the future, how could the cluster organizations increase their cooperation to fulfill the needs of SMEs?
Yeah, thank you for giving us some ideas on that. I think it is important for cluster organizations to reduce time to market on behalf of the whole entire sector, being SMEs or large scale companies. I think it's very important that we focus on innovation. Innovation has never been more in demand than what it is right now. We need to enhance the supply of offshore wind in Europe. In order to do that, we need innovation, we need new technologies being developed. We also need to be able to storage wind energy. We need to have infrastructure that allow the distribution of wind energy. We need to be able to use wind energy efficiently, both on the consumer, private consumer, but also on the industry level. And then there's the whole sector coupling and power to X. So I think the whole wind industry, supply chain and sector faces huge demands and challenges that needs a lot of collaboration and also international collaboration. So I think I would really like to encourage other cluster organizations that we could do that together. I think we should put our efforts into supporting transnational innovation projects, transnational innovation collaborations. So moving from meeting points, which is very important. The meeting point and the matchmaking is very important, but I would like to move it from a meeting point to actually entering into transnational innovation collaborations, solving some of the challenges that we need. And it is not just developing new technologies, it is also scaling and demonstrating the technologies that are very close to market. So I think that's what cluster organizations should focus on. We are open for collaborations in this regard.
Thank you. Now I have a look if we have some questions. If they can give me the questions, because I saw that there were several, but they're not on my screen yet. I'm waiting for a bit of backup from the team that collected our questions. I saw that we had 2. Okay, there they are. Thank you. I have a question for Glenda. How could the cluster organizations within the North Sea region increase their cooperation to fulfill the needs of SMEs? No, that's my question. There is one no. Okay, well, I think something goes wrong. They're more of like my text on the screen, so I think we can make a roundup here. Thank you for your explanation, and I'm sure that if people had some questions, that they will definitely be answered on the website afterwards. There is a little technical difficulty. Thank you very much. As to conclude, now we're looking forward for the implementation of the EU's offshore renewable energy strategy that takes into account the specific needs and advantages of SMEs in offshore wind. There is definitely a further need for financing on several levels to support SMEs. It's also important, as we said, to invite each other for B2Bs and even organize B2B matchmaking events together. We should also continue the further use and development of online tools like the company directory. And what we can also sense on what Glenda said is that collaboration must go to the next level, further than matchmaking. Transnational supply chain collaboration, common innovation and demonstration projects are needed for the upscaling in the EU. Thank you for giving us this clear picture on all of this.